Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, and welcome to this sixth webinar in the 2022 Travel Retail Sustainability Week, entitled The Future of Food. Apologies for the slight delay in starting. We had a little technical issue, but we're all here. So great. Thanks for joining us. I'm Michael Barrett, Head of Events and Corporate Social Responsibility at TR Business. And I'll be joined here co-moderating this session by my colleague, Charlotte Turner, who will introduce herself in just a couple of minutes. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and of course to our speakers who will be introducing themselves in a couple of minutes for the time and effort in taking part in this session. But also a special thanks to our headline sponsor for this event, Mars, and of course the sponsors of this session, who are Mars, Diageo, Nestlé, and Ritter Sport. But also thanks to all of the sponsors for supporting this event, whose company names and logos you can see on screen. As you know, this event is free of charge. There's no fee for registration. And the reason for that is we want to get the messages that we're talking about this week about sustainability, diversity, inclusion, health, well-being, and so on, as far and wide to the industry and beyond, of course, which is why we make this event free of charge, available not only here on this website, but also on the TR Business YouTube channel. So your colleagues, or if you can review sessions that you want to watch again, or sessions that you missed or your colleagues have missed, then they can see that, of course, at any time. We launched this event last year, 2021, in the middle of the pandemic as an online event only, and it's the only event in the industry dedicated uniquely to sustainability. It was great to see a lot of people connect during the week, but we were really encouraged to see the huge amount of people connecting and watching all the sessions on our YouTube channel in the weeks and months that followed. So it just goes to show the huge interest in this topic about sustainability. And on the back of this, we launched our sustainability newsletter, sustainability section, and as Charlotte mentioned earlier this week, the special sustainability edition of TR Business as well, that we launched, I think it was last week. So the whole objective of this event really is to share ideas, both from within the industry, from industry stakeholders, but also from outside the industry. We want you to use this as an opportunity for more creativity and collaboration when it comes to sustainability. Listen to the companies within the industry that you know, but also you'll be hearing from a lot of companies and fresh faces that you haven't come across before, including in this session. So we want to bring in new concepts and potential partners for you, as we did last year with several companies who were new to the industry, including the Plastic Bank with David Katz, the CEO of the Plastic Bank, who's one of our keynote speakers. And there are plenty more this week as well. We've got a great program and speaker lineup for you. It's already been there for the last few days. We had the keynote session on Monday with a design session just afterwards. Yesterday, we had one session on health and well-being and diversity and inclusion, part of this broader scope of topics that we're addressing this year. Today, we had earlier today a session on circularity, on recycling, upcycling, particularly in the design, but also in food waste sector. We've got this session on food, the future of food and confectionery as well. And tomorrow we've got another category specific session on spirits, wines and spirits category, as well as our two-part closing keynote, green influencers, combining people, planet and purpose. So do tune in for all those sessions that are still to come. Of course, we can't forget our sustainability pitch program, and we've had 4 companies vying for the travel retail sustainability trailblazer and hero status yesterday, and another 4 today. So congratulations to Altavia and Mondelez for achieving the TR Sustainability Trailblazer status, and to Nestlé and Gonzalez Baez for achieving the Travel Retail Sustainability Hero status. Today coming up, we've got 4 more with L'Oreal, Mondelez once again, Moroccan Oil and New Wave, and that will be at 2 p.m. British summertime. So before I hand over to Charlotte, just one more thing, please do use the Q&A panel on the right to put your questions to our speakers, and we'll field those as they come in throughout the session. As I mentioned, this is on video on demand after, and also on the YouTube channel, so tune in again if you miss anything. If you want to see the full program, it's in the session description just below the video panel you're watching right now, as well as all the speaker names and photos and bios, I believe, as well. So if you're curious about who it is who's speaking, you can just click there. Thanks very much. Now over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, I am Charlotte Turner, Editorial Director for TR Business Magazine. I look forward to continuing the conversations we've had so far this week and many, many different topics. And it indeed, after each session, it feeds into the next one as well, which is really great. I wanted to say, obviously, this session is called The Future of Food. And in all the years that I've been with TR Business, I think it's almost 11 or 12 at the moment, I forget, we've been conducting the Global Industry Survey, which we publish in the January issue every year. And as part of that, in the last few years, we have increased the number of sustainability related questions. And I have to say that the confectionery and food companies are some of the most engaged on this topic, and we always receive an enormous amount of feedback from them. Often, you know, that there's a lot of developments and initiatives they want to shout about and explain to the rest of the industry that they're doing, but also they're very candid about the journey that they're on and the improvements that can still be made. And I'm glad that we have so many panelists here today to discuss this topic in more detail. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, this session is going to explore the food category within global travel retail beyond confectionery, particularly for sustainably produced and packaged food. It will also explore how food and confectionery suppliers, large and small, are approaching the consumer shift to more health conscious consumption when snacking or tasting their favorite foods and sweet treats. And this includes discussion around zero sugar, low calorie, sustainably sourced cocoa, gluten-free, and there's so many more topics that we can branch into. So before we get too involved in the content for the session, I'd like to turn over to the panelists to introduce themselves to you today. So I will pick on Morten to start.
Thank you, Charlotte and Michael, for the invitation. Like Charlotte said, my name is Morten, and I am one of the co-founders of Copenhagen-based chewing gum brand True Gum, and I'm very happy to be here to take part in these discussions. True Gum was founded here in Copenhagen in 2017 out of my kitchen, and today we are the world leader within plastic-free and plant-based chewing gum with more than 20,000 stores worldwide. And in travel retail, we work with partners like Heinemann, Dufry, Viking Line, and W.A. Smith. Before I founded True Gum, I worked as a management consultant in Bain & Company. And although I'm fairly new to the travel retail industry, I strongly believe that it's important in this industry, as in any other, to have sustainability as part of our DNA as a company. And not only because it's the right thing to do and that we should take care of our planet, but also because I see sustainability as perhaps the biggest business opportunity of our generation. And I think it will be a major driver of growth going forward, especially also in the food category.
Thank you very much, Morten. Now I'll move on to Karl.
Yeah, hello everyone from beautiful Stockholm. And thank you, Charlotte and Michael, for having me here. I've been living and breathing travel retail industry since 2003 when I joined Nuance, now Dufry. And before leaving in 2019, I had advanced to managing the Swiss flagship operation in Switzerland, at the time Zurich and Geneva, as well as the Nordics, Sweden and Finland, over a total of, at that time, 11 years. Since then, I've been partnering up with Blueprint, a business development agency founded in 2016 by Thomas Henningsen. And I have teammates in Europe and the US, and we offer brands and even services our 360 business development capabilities. Apart from that, I'm also in the Nordic Travel Retail Group and an advisory board of the Airport Retail Group up here in the Nordics as well. Yeah, and we at Blueprint strongly believe that green business is good business. Thank you.
Thank you, Karl. And now we'll move on to Ariane.
Hello everybody, Ariane van Mansius calling from the Netherlands. I own a consultancy firm in food and packaging innovations, mainly focused on sustainability, and also the owner of the first True Price Cafe in the world, where we would like to discuss and inform our guests about the true price of products, because the commercial price, a lot is taken out of consideration, and we would like to share knowledge, but also inspiration in that field. And one day I hope also that will come to the travel retail business, because tickets are interesting to calculate on true pricing, but also a lot of chocolate, cacao, liquors are good stuff to calculate. So I'm very excited to join this call. Thank you, and see you later.
Thank you, Ariane. Now move on to James.
Hi everybody, thanks for inviting me. My name's James. I'm the founder of Love Cocoa and a new brand called Hip Chocolate. My inspiration behind setting up a chocolate company was my great-great-grandfather, who set up Cadbury Chocolate back in 1824. Back then, they used to have a little cafe, a little grocery store, which they started to do hot chocolates, and the sort of the aroma and the smells of that shop got really people interested into chocolate. So they developed a chocolate bar, and the sort of the backbone of Cadbury's 200 years ago was all about being sustainable, being ethical, really looking after their suppliers, and doing some incredible things. And with my brand of cocoa, we wanted to really replicate some of that early Cadbury success with our brand. So we're 100% plastic free. We plant a tree for every chocolate bar or product we sell. We just planted our millionth tree in the last 2 years, which has been a really big achievement for us. We're quite new to the travel retail space. We're just starting to work with Do Free, which is really exciting for us. And we also just launched a new brand called Hip Chocolate, which is the first oat milk chocolate brand. So rather than using dairy, we use oat milk, which is has a smaller footprint in terms of carbon emissions. And yeah, really excited to be part of this discussion. Hopefully I can add to the conversation.
I know you absolutely will. And now moving on to Stuart.
So good afternoon, everyone. Stuart Driver. I'm the General Manager of Nestlé's International Travel Retail Business Unit. I've had the good fortune of working in this industry once before, 2002 through 2006. And returned to the industry 2016. Thank you, Charlotte and Michael, for the invitation to talk today. Nestlé has made some really significant announcements over the last couple of years in relation to the zero carbon objective for 2050, and in particular, at the back end of last year, the generation regeneration initiative in terms of steps the organization is taking. And I'm very excited to come and share some of those and with everyone in the group today and everyone who's watching. Thank you.
Thank you all for introducing ourselves to the audience today. I actually wanted to head back to you, Stuart. Obviously, people are very interested to hear what Nestlé, as a huge corporation, is doing to improve the sustainability of its organisation and all of its processes. And I know that you have been very vocal in what Nestlé have been doing more recently in travel retail, but also as a group. You mentioned a couple of those things there. I hope you could maybe delve into one or two of those pillars just to give our audience a little bit more detail.
Certainly, thanks, Charlotte. Look, I think there's a couple of angles to this. First of all, I would say well done for the naming of the session about the future of food, because too often in our industry we get focused around confectionery. Food is absolutely a fantastic opportunity for the industry. And I know Michael kicked off the very beginning of the week saying this whole week is about sustainability. It's not about mags and this and that. But food as a revenue driving opportunity is a huge opportunity for retailers and airports. The beauty of it is it's something that can actually be done and help deliver the sustainable footprint that the airports are demanding and that the retailers are therefore looking for. So I think food in its widest sense is on the cusp of a really exciting time within our particular industry. Now, talking about what we as a business are doing very specifically, 2018, our recently, as it was then, our recently appointed CEO, Mark Schneider, made the commitment to hit carbon zero by 2050 and to achieve 50% of that by the end of this decade. Pleased to say that as a group, Nestlé has already gone past peak carbon. We had peak carbon 2019. So we've already gone past peak carbon in terms of where we're on a declining trend and on track towards that 50% target for the end of this decade. We're doing that despite the fact we're growing the business. So we're talking the absolute amount of carbon that's going out is coming down the way. So I think that we're making that a big organization like ours can make huge strides, hopefully becomes an example for others. I think beyond that, I think the step change in the thinking came at the back end of last year. And again, publicly shared, it's out there since September. We started talking about generation regeneration. And whether you're new into the organization, and Nestlé is a huge organization, but whether you're new into the organization or whether you're a little bit more time served like me, it's gotten everybody really excited about what we're trying to do as an organization. Because the step change is really then saying it's not about sustainability. It's about going beyond sustainability and achieving a world where you can regenerate what's going on through, in particular, regenerative agricultural practices. And I think that becomes a really motivating and exciting thing to be doing. It's the important and the right thing to be doing for the planet, for consumers, for everybody. The right thing to be doing for our shareholders as a consequence as well. And I think, as Morten alluded to, it's absolutely bang on where the trajectory of the world is going. So it makes business sense as well as ethical and planetary sense. So there's a lot of exciting things that are going on in this space. And I think the thinking behind this regenerative is taking sustainability on a step to a point where we put goodness back into the soil. It's critical for us as an organization. Again, we've been public, it's all out there, you can go Google it. 70% of our carbon footprint comes from agricultural practice, okay? Of which half of that 70% is actually coming from predominantly methane through cows, it's dairy. And we can really start to attack our carbon footprint in these particular areas, and we're doing so. Lots of other things to attack the other 30% that's out there, and we're working on all of those as well when it comes to packaging, logistics, all the other bits and pieces that we're doing. But I think the motivating North Star thought is around this regenerative, and actually not just sustaining, but going beyond sustaining and regenerating the planet. And it can be done. And that's the really exciting thing. And some of your partners through this week have started to allude to some of the potential that's out there. And I've heard a number of people who were at the expo in Dubai, for example, talking about what was being shown there. There is a lot of technology out there. There are a lot of things being developed. And as humankind has proven down the centuries, we put our minds to something, we can come up with really good solutions. And I think in this space, we will do so. Nestlé, really proud to be part of the organization and the steps that we're taking and the things that we're doing to help that along.
We've been talking a lot about consumer perception so far this week and how that feeds into what every one of us, or every one of you are doing, and the importance of communicating what you're doing to the consumer. And there seems to be a bit of a split opinion being shared this week about being vocal about those things. And some people thinking, there should be, in the last session, in fact, Stephanie from Lagardère said, we should be, there should be a sense of humility about what we're doing. We should just do good, and that should be enough. But then Chris, on the other hand, from Concourse, was saying, I have seen it work really effectively where retailers actually promoting what they're doing on the outside of the actual store. And that gives back to the consumer, because then they're obviously more incentivized to go and make a purchase, but it makes them feel good about what they're doing too. And perhaps then maybe they'll carry that through to other parts of their journey, if we're talking about travel retail specifically. So, Stuart, what's your opinion on the importance of pushing all of these things that you're doing out to the consumer and letting them know?
We have to. And I think even for an organization which is historically very Swiss, and we don't shout from the rooftops. Maybe we're kind of the other end of the spectrum. There's nobody American on this panel. And if there's anybody American on the call, excuse me if you use the Americans are a little bit the other end of the spectrum. They'll shout and talk about how great they are. The Swiss, we don't. We tend to be a little bit more conservative in the way, but we have an obligation to. And the reason we have an obligation to is consumers want to help. Everybody does. I think the awareness of the planetary crisis that we're going through is there for everyone. And consumers want to be able to play their part. We all do. So I think we have an obligation to share. I remember the very first session this week, you had somebody on from Mars who was talking about it was a bit of a culture shift for them to be out talking in front of what they do. It's exactly the same for us. We're historically not been ones who will talk about what we're going to do. We've historically always talked about what we've done. Now we're talking about what we're doing, and we are doing things, but also in context of what this journey that we're on, because we have to. So very happy we've had the opportunity. And again, congrats to TRB for what you've been setting up. We were very happy to win the 5-star award last year with Smarties because it's something we've done, but that's an indicator of the journey that we're on with moving to paper packaging on a huge global brand, taking out 400 metric tons of plastics every year out of the supply chain straight away. So the importance of communicating to people what we're doing, the journey that we're on, and you alluded to it in your introductory comments, you know, we need to be honest about it's a tough journey. We don't have all the solutions that will get us to zero. We know pretty much how we get to 50% and even beyond 50%. We're on the journey to get down there. But we don't have all the solutions, and we need partners and people to help with the cause. So I was particularly interested listening to Graham on the last session and some of his stuff. I want to connect Graham up with a good mate of mine who works in our packaging unit, because I think there may be some really interesting connections that we can make on the back of that one. But whether you're used to talking about it or not, we have to, because we have to help consumers, because consumers are the ones who will demand the change and make the difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, you referred to Marcus from Mars earlier, and also Graham from EnviroPoint and Luggage Point. Yeah, both made excellent contributions earlier on today, and indeed earlier on this week. I wanted to throw that question to James, actually, from a younger brand perspective, and then another second sort of follow-up question is, you know, the difficulties and also the advantages of setting up a brand from scratch, considering sustainability from the outset, rather than having to switch an already very well established brand back, you know, sort of reinvent the procedures along the journey, because they've been so, you know, they've been there for a long time. So the first question is, obviously, how important do you think it is to push out the communication about your processes to consumers? And then obviously the follow-up question as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think being a new brand, sort of coming into, you know, pretty competitive market, you know, huge players out there, then, you know, we've got to stand for something. We've got to be different. And I think one of the key things we sort of noticed, and with my sort of background, I guess I always wanted to create a brand which I was proud of, which, you know, my ancestors would hopefully be proud of as well. So we were always sort of sustainable. We used to give 10% of our profits to charity, but that sort of didn't really hit a chord. So we changed our messaging, and sort of it was this one bar, one tree notion, which we launched a couple of years ago. And since we did that, a lot of consumers have sort of really bought into it. Sort of they're buying something. Our product is quite premium. It's sort of a self treat or a really nice gift to give to someone, and it's sort of, you know, it tastes great, but also you need to be more than tasting great now, I think. So being able to sort of feel good about what you're eating is really important. And as part of that, yeah, we're plastic free. So we use a product called NatureFlex, which looks like plastic, works very similar to plastic, but is basically made of a wood pulp to seal our products, to make sure they keep them fresh. We're all paper based, so we've removed any plastic. And I think, yeah, being a smaller company, it's definitely easier to do that. But I think that, you know, some of these bigger companies, I think it's great what Nestlé are doing. I think 28 years is quite a long time to become carbon sort of neutral or get to that 0 point. And we're already at that, but it's great that we had this discussion. I think the smaller players have got to sort of get there quicker, and then it will get I think the bigger companies to sort of get there even quicker as well, because in 28 years time, 2050 that is, then, you know, there's going to be all these consumers who are the young generation. For us is the people who are really, really interested in the environment and really focused. And I think that's the sort of Greta effect. So as they grow up and they become, you know, consumers and buy more and more stuff, then I think that's going to be really important for the industry.
Indeed. So being a smaller operation, you're able to be more nimble and agile and make those decisions perhaps more quickly. But on the other hand, obviously Nestlé has the scale, so potentially the impact that they have, positively or negatively, is obviously a lot greater. So yeah, picking up on your point there, you know, about the consumer angle to this debate is, you know, how important it is to let your end consumer know about the packaging, which is made out of wood pulp essentially, because you know, you say you're a plastic free brand, but then some consumers might look at it and go, hang on, that's plastic. But unless you tell them that it's not and it's made out of wood pulp, then you may get quite you know, angry consumers. So in your if for your company, it's extremely important that you communicate that. Otherwise, you may come across as actually creating falsehoods in that respect. Is that something that you might agree with?
Yeah, 100%. We've had people get confused thinking that we put it on the back of packet that it's plastic free, then they open it up and it looks like plastic. So it's really trying to inform the customer. And I think with this product, it's getting more and more mainstream now. It's still, I think the reason the bigger companies aren't sort of jumping on it is it is more expensive. It's about 3 times the cost as a normal plastic. So obviously there's margin considerations there for bigger companies, but for us, we really want to be doing good and sort of getting that message across. And I think we're not perfect at getting that message across. We changed the packaging quite a few times to try and get that making sure that people read what we're doing, and making sure that the back of pack is super important to educate people. So and then using social media, email marketing, stuff like that, and just telling the message constantly, and trying to get that over, because it can get a little bit confusing at times, and it is. As we grow and more and more people use this product, then hopefully the consumers will understand, and they'll know that they can put it in their compost bin, and within 8 weeks that it'll go, sort of thing. So I think it'll take time, but we're starting to see a big movement in the use of it.
Absolutely. And you've been able to be quite creative, as you say, with social media, viral marketing, being a young brand yourselves, you do this with aplomb. And, you did a pop-up, I think I saw recently in London, where you obviously were able again to use that as a great platform for what you're doing, for sustainability initiatives. I wanted to pass over these questions to Morten now. Obviously, again, important for you to be communicating what sets you apart from the gum players, because if for nothing else, you need to obviously increase your sales by making it clear how you're different.
Absolutely, and I just want to echo what Stuart said about communicating. What makes us different, because I think oftentimes with sustainability it comes with an additional cost. So in our case, it's paying people throughout the supply chain sufficiently, it's using better ingredients, it's producing with green energy. All those things come at a cost, and at the end of the day, the consumer is going to pay a premium for that. And if we're not communicating why it's more expensive, what are we doing differently, then the consumer doesn't understand why they should be paying a little bit extra for this type of products. I do want to add one other thing though, which is I think we should be, when having these discussions, I think there are more reasons why we have to be communicating why we're doing it, and not only for the commercial aspect, but also simply for the sake of inspiring others. So now James talks about Nature Flakes. I mean, we're already using Nature Flakes, but let's say we weren't using Nature Flakes, right? That would be something like a very clear action point for us to pick up and implement in our production. So that's one reason. And then I also think we should be quite transparent about the things that we're not doing. So not only highlighting, we're good at X, Y, Z, but also being very transparent about we are struggling with these 3 aspects, because I think we can learn from a lot from each other, and I think at the end of the day we're all facing the same issues. And I think also from a consumer perspective, in order to stay authentic and be seen as someone who's really pushing for change in this category, it's important that it doesn't seem like you are hiding something under the rug. So I would say also be transparent about the issues where you're perhaps not living up to your own expectations. And I mean, even with True Gum, we strive to be sustainable 100% through everything we do, but there are also areas where, I'm not satisfied with where we are right now, and we are very open about that, and we try to improve on those aspects as well.
Thank you, Morten. I wanted to pass over to Karl now, who, of course, you work with indeed, and as he mentioned earlier, he's got experience working for a very well-known retailer, of course, which is now Do Free. I just wanted to ask, from your perspective, how things have changed since you obviously first entered travel retail. I know probably an enormous amount, and the shifting perceptions to now, but also I know I'm sure you will say things that are, accelerated and retailers are now more interested in sustainable products, et cetera, but I know from previous conversations we've had that it's not as straightforward as you might think it is. Just because there's a lot of great conversations being had doesn't mean that it's paved the way for these brands to enter travel retail seamlessly, should we say.
Yeah, you're touching quite a few touch points here which go in different directions here, but oh my God, 2003, yes, the industry was completely different. And I allowed to say myself that even in 2015, 16, it was still very different. When we participated in a tender for Swedavia, the Swedish airport authorities, and subsequently won, we had to place a sustainability manager or environmental manager. When we discussed this internally at Dufry, we said, oh, that's the only country that needs one, and Canada. Yeah, that's 5 years back. Since then, we know what at that year, then Dufry launched corporate social responsibility in the annual report. Sarah Branquinho took a lot of actions. But I mean, I remember all those discussions about plastic bags. Do we charge for them or not? In 2016 or 17, I started charging for them before it was obligatory in Sweden. So we have come a long way through the industry as such. But on the topic of the challenges in itself, and Michael, yes, you said not to talk about, I'll say the elephant in the room. Often the concession fee model, it's in the context, it still needs to be mentioned, because the pressure that I or we at Dufry at the time had or still have to safeguard and increase profitability is put upon the airport, is coming from the airports and the competition that is on the market, and is a big entry barrier for smaller startup brands, like we all know, because you need quite an economy of scale in the industry to be able to place your products at the margins that are asked for in this industry. So I think we need to look for a solution there as well. And I know certain airports have been working on solutions in order to drive more diversity in the food category. And I'm not talking the sense of place, because the sense of place which you have, a lot have been done. I was born and raised in Portugal. I love passing through the tax and duty free there, because that's my last opportunity to buy olive oils. And I have to say now at a reasonable price as well, that I always take back to Sweden. Or pork, ham, etc. that I love. It doesn't taste at all when the same when I buy it here. So that part has gone a long way, and that's in a certain way also sustainable products, because they're locally produced and made. But there's far more opportunity to increase the amount of brands as well. We have, when you go through and Stewart mentioned it, there's much more than confectionery, but still food is driven by, I think it's 75% is chocolate and confectionery, sugar confectionery. There's still very little other products apart from the locally produced, but also on the brand level. We have seen, I've grew with Lindt, I've grew with Nestlé and the others, and Mars and M&M's, but there's more to it. We can have more brands in travel retail that have this young DNA that Morten or James are mentioning, that those new upcoming brands, which have a completely different DNA. Why? They are born with that setup. Us older generation, we have to work towards getting greener in this sense. Morten, I know, when he started in the kitchen, that was his mission, right? And therefore he has a completely different approach than older generation brands have had and are now trying to pursue as well.
Oh, because you mentioned the elephant in the room, let's bring it up again and put the spotlight on the big four-footed friend. Do you think the margins model, the business model today, the concession fee model, is a major barrier then to smaller, more eco-friendly brands who don't have the same economies of scale that the big giants do, like Nestlé, Mondelez, and so on, to entering the travel retail sector? And do you therefore think that if that's the case, then retailers need to adopt a more adapted business model for these brands?
I think you could always almost have a better answer from James and Morten when they are faced with the requirements to come into travel retail. I believe that more can be done in order to drive to have more diversity in the category. Not saying that Dufry, both, I mean, Dufry, Heinemann, Lagardère are all doing great stuff. Elevated Life from Dufry, for instance, defining a section in the store, and we have heard also from Lagardère what they're doing at the beginning of the week. There's a lot being done, but the financials are still pretty much the same. I cannot express myself since I left just before COVID. I know contracts have been renegotiated, but there are certainly opportunity to give. In the industry, we were always a bit conservative and safe because of the financials, and to have more opportunities to give chances and opportunities to smaller brands would be nice to do. And we can only do it within the Trinity model of airports also allowing for, I don't want to say separate concession fee, but for a model that rewards those, it's risk taking in a certain way. Does that answer a little bit the question?
Yeah, it is a different business model, and I think it would be interesting to see in the coming weeks, months, if airports do follow that lead. What's interesting, though, as I mentioned in an earlier session, is that airports are looking to be carbon neutral by 2050. You've got the ACI carbon accreditation program, which they're all subscribing to. And yet in the recent Toulouse declaration, there's absolutely no mention whatsoever of anything to do with commercial operations, retail, food and beverage at all. So it's, you wonder whether it is a priority if it's just looking at the aeronautical side of things without any consideration for retail. So let's hope that, airports do actually encourage the retail partners to adopt a different, more adapted business model to smaller eco-friendly brands. Charlotte, let's just go to Morten because he's had his hand up a couple of times.
No, I just wanted to add to what Karl just said, and I think absolutely it's a challenge. I think as both a startup and a sustainable company, there are different costs, and we don't have the exact same scale as the big players in the industry do have. However, I do find there's still a quite unique opportunity for sustainable food brands in travel retail right now. Recent McKinsey study found that COVID has really shifted consumer focus on sustainability, and that more than 50% of consumers are actually willing to pay a premium for sustainable products. So even if we are facing higher margin requirements that you would find in domestic retail, I think it's also up to the retailers to kind of work a little bit with the pricing to maybe charge those 10 to 15% more, which data indicates that people are actually willing to pay for sustainable product, and not to see the sustainable products as kind of a substitute for the conventional products, but more as an alternative to the range. This is speaking from my own personal experience, but when I go travel and I go into the duty-free stores, I very often see 2 or 3 facings of the same products, and just looking at, for instance, the amount of change and assortment you have in the beauty sections, I feel like we've not seen the same change in the food and beverage category. And I do believe that we could increase penetration and ultimately basket size by kind of having the sustainable alternatives also on the shelves next to the conventional ones, and not instead of the conventional ones.
It's an interesting point, Morten. I was actually going to bring the conversation over to Ariane anyway, and then consequentially she has raised her hand anyway. But talking about pricing structure and reflecting and talking about margins and premiums, reflecting the true price of what things cost. Ariane, obviously you have great insight on these aspects, but I'll let you refer to what your hand was raised for first before digging into the other topic.
exactly this, because we were talking about price and extra cost in the chain. What we have experienced, true pricing is has its basis here in the Netherlands via the True Price Institute, Impact Institute. And we have one of the most initiatives around this theme. Germany is doing something, France is doing something. And I recently joined a big call with all the ministries, our calculations room in the Netherlands, and digged into this deeply. For coffee, for example, and tea, what we see is very different. For tea, it's more on the ecological part than on the human part, that there are external extra costs that have been taken out of consideration. With coffee, chocolate, it's more on the human part, but also on the monoculture biodiversity loss. But what we see is also what Harari, the famous guy said, is that if we raise on an average 2% on all our prices worldwide, we are already able to make a more sustainable world. And that's also what Paul Pullman, ex-Unilever CEO, said. If we all take a Netflix abonnement from around 20 euros per month, with those costs per person, we can already manage this crisis. So we're very much looking into all individual initiatives, and also am I here in my cafe and calculating tea and coffee and juice, and see exactly what's happening between those three items. And we do a lot of learnings from other calculations. But basically, when we put it down from a kilo of coffee, which raises around 108% in costs, in a cup of coffee is only 10 grams of coffee. And then we are only talking about an average of 5 cents, which is an average, like Harari said, of a 2% increase on price. So we are talking here about a much higher price increase on Nature Flex, which is 3 times more expensive than a PE foil or whatever. We're talking about much more cost involved. But what I see is that it's not that much what we should pay extra in order to consume within these planetary boundaries. What James already said, then in his perspective, food and packaging. In the food is absolutely the most impact. The packaging is, especially when you have a product where animal protein is inside, it's really a fraction of the sustainability indicator. So the focus should mainly be on food waste, food miles, ready meals where a lot of energy is used, and then comes on place 5 comes packaging, and a lot of the time the emphasis is on the packaging, because that's what the consumer sees at first. He buys a product, but he first opens it from all this packaging. But what I am sure is that James, with his Cadbury and oat milk, that the biggest hidden impact was in the milk. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, sure. No, you're 100% correct. Yeah, we're just in the middle of a study in terms of our carbon footprint per product, and we're coming out about 50% less than sort of a high street chocolate bar with our new oat milk chocolate. So yeah, there's a huge amount of savings in terms of CO2 by using plant-based milk, which is also, we use oat as well, which is good in terms of water consumption as well, and sort of land. So it's oat is the most sustainable. I think Oatly have done a really good job in sort of getting that message across, which makes our job a lot easier. So yeah.
What's your reaction to that? Because you keep saying that your biggest carbon emission is the cows farting.
It's the case, and so I mean, Ariane and James, absolutely right. We know our single largest, as a group, I'm not talking about our confectionery business, but as a group, our single largest contributor to the CO2 footprint is the agricultural practices, with half of that coming from the dairy side. So it's a reality, and moving people, encouraging consumers and educating consumers to move away from these options is something that's going to help all of us. So, fully aligned with what the guys are saying here, and the opportunity, coming back to the point about communication that Charlotte referenced earlier on, it's our job to keep helping people understand why, because again, as Ariane says, people are seeing a lot about packaging, which is a significant and important part of the pie, and it was talked a lot about in the earlier session this morning. But anytime you're in the food space, it's the upstream part is where the greatest amount of effort can be made, and moving people onto either non-meat based solutions in the things that they will eat, or non-dairy based solutions in the things that they will drink, is absolutely going to help.
Is there a major barrier to Nestlé having a much more marked shift to alternatives to dairy milk, like oat?
It's not about having it's about educating consumers, because consumers are used to buying into what they're doing. So, you know, you could shift all the way in one go if you want, but all you're going to do is you know, leave a whole legacy of everything behind. So you've got to actually sort of move and bring people along with you and on the journey. And please, let's also bear in mind there's a whole industry of dairy farmers and you know, and everything that goes with that, and that's also going to be managed very carefully, because you're also talking people's livelihoods, and certain geographies of the world are, you know, very strong in this particular area. So you know, we need to manage it as swiftly as we can. I'm reminded now of the Swiss politician at the start of the start of the COVID, where he was talking about we need to go as quickly as possible but as slowly as necessary. And it's finding that balance between the two. But that the trajectory is heading in that direction is clear. And you see it in what consumers are buying into. Also, one small footprint onto exactly what James has been doing with his new brand. I congratulate him on what he's doing. We've got a major announcement that we'll be making tomorrow. Nicola will share it with you. We can't talk about it today because tomorrow, as a group, we're making an announcement. But we've got something exciting to share tomorrow. So a little trailer for everyone who's watching. Please join tomorrow's session as well. More steps down the journey from our side.
Thanks, Stuart. Ari, comment?
Yeah, I have what is important for consumers. If you communicate your product has less plastic or no plastic, you're putting the emphasis on the packaging that you're using plastics. So what we see from our perspective, if we communicate the real true price of a product, people get insight in very different factors than the fact that it's less plastic or no plastic. And by putting on the packaging it's less plastic, they were not intent to buy the plastic. So it is like an emphasis on something that they didn't want beforehand, and why they didn't buy it for the plastic. So to communicate those kind of things on the packaging, we see that it's actually negative. But if you communicate the true price about the human cost or the water or the CO2, that is a different way of communicating, and also a different emphasis on sustainability.
Thank you for that, Ariane. I think in previous discussions, Michael, actually, I think I'm stealing your question, actually, that you may have put to Ariane before, about how viable the true price concept could be in travel retail, considering that unfortunately consumers have a perception of travel retail that prices are that bit higher anyway. And you know, just to use the UK example, and to be honest with you, a lot of places around the world, you know, the cost of inflation, you know, on household items is you know, it's becoming a crisis. Obviously in the UK it's a crisis, people will know that. So people are perhaps at this moment very, very sensitive to any cost increase. So I think, as I said, I'm using Michael's question, but you know, how viable do you think the true price concept is in travel retail?
The true price should be the new price, in my belief, the standard, because we're actually not paying the real price at the moment, meaning that we take from our next generation, or over the back from other farmers or from the planet. So for me, there's only one thing, and that's the real price. But yes, we are in a difficult time, and we are for the first time confronted with such a high inflation, making price on its own at this moment a very hot topic where people talk about a lot. It's like the daily buzz at the moment, I think, and everybody is feeling it in his purse. And with the result, what is coming from that, because this money can only be spent one time. But for me, there is only one standard. If it's in travel retail, if it's a ticket price, if it's food, for me, we should pay the real price, because otherwise we are living outside of the planetary boundaries.
Point very well made. Karl, I believe you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, on the price side, I mean, I come to the original statement: green business, good business. But ultimately, I fully agree with Ariane. It's about choices. And we saw Mindset, an excellent presentation from Peter Mohn on Tuesday, I believe, which highlighted that 4 out of 5 consumers, travel retail shoppers, were concerned about living and shopping in a sustainable way, and 3 out of 4 pay great attention to sustainability. But he also highlighted it was 75%, I believe, that are willing to pay more for sustainable products, up to 15%, 69, it was 15% or something like that. As a retailer, as an ex-retailer, I can say I always welcomed a higher unit price because that drives the ATV. But I mean, it was also very interesting to see that the sustainability as a topic became higher than travel exclusive, gift with purchase, which, by the way, gift with purchase is probably negative on the CO2. We heard about how brands taking away a gift with purchase, and all the promotion. It outperformed all those topics. So price, it's about choices. Perhaps Netflix yesterday, they dropped a lot because they lost consumers. As Ariane said, perhaps that's the first movement towards a certain choice, and hopefully in the direction of sustainability. So ultimately, it's about better for you and the planet, or better for us and the planet, and putting people first in the sustainability chain.
Absolutely. And I think as you mentioned there, education is a hugely important part of that. Michael, I believe we've got some questions coming in from the audience.
Yeah, interestingly, on the points that have just been raised about education, communication, and so on. Let's go to the last question that just came in. It's about the method of I'll just read the question. What method do different brands find is the most impactful for communicating their eco-credentials in travel retail with consumers? Is it point of sale, digital advertising, social channels, or using bloggers and so on? But I'll add on to that another question that came in earlier, because it's kind of related. Is communicating on social media is reaching the younger age segments, and I think this is in reaction to what you, James, was saying, and perhaps Morten as well. But how do you get the message across to older, less tech-savvy consumers for younger, smaller companies like Love Cocoa and True Gum? Obviously, the giants like Nestlé have the budget to go full, main media. So what's the most impactful way to get the message across in general, and how do you communicate to other age segments that are not on social media? Throw that to anybody, really. I'll start with you, James.
Yeah, I think we're a small company. We're a team of 15, so we're trying to improve our communication all the time. We working with consultants who have got a lot more experience. We work with bigger companies to try and help us really define what we stand for, how we're different with our hit brand, and trying to get that communication across better. At the moment, the best way we do it, being a food brand, is having it on pack, having it on POSs. Getting that sort of, when people are thinking about buying the product, making sure that it's very prominent with either on the packaging or as part of the display. That's the only way we can really do it. But we're always learning and always keen to learn how the bigger companies like Nestlé obviously do it very well. So I guess it's tricky for us, but we're improving all the time.
Stuart, do you want to react to that?
Yeah, and I think it's not an either-or question, it's both and. You have to be able to get to the younger consumers via the channels that they're used to using. The consumers that are maybe the other end of the spectrum, like you and me, Michael, you got to talk to us more at point of sale. And because that's where we're used to absorbing information from. One of the critical things is the simplicity and the clarity of the message, because consumers are being bombarded with so many messages through their day. To have something which is very clear and simple and accessible and quick, that's the critical thing. And I think where we scored well last year with Smarties as an example for people to look at was very simple. The flash on the pack, now in paper. And it's just very simple and very clear. And I think the things that will go down the track, and I know this plays to the packaging end, as Ariane was talking about, and it's one part thereof, but the things we'll do coming down the track with the Income Accelerator initiative, which we announced at the back end of last year, the beginning of this year, that will be, again, similar sort of stories, how we're going to simply and clearly help consumers understand there will be a premium to the chocolate on this product because we're paying more directly to the cocoa farmers in the fields in the Ivory Coast. And these become the simplicity and the clarity of the message, and it's got to come consistently. So whether you get it via the website, whether you get it through influencers or on your social feed, or whether you get it at point of sale, the consistency and the simplicity of the message is key.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to come back on that point about sales stuff, but you mentioned the Smarties now in paper. There was another question that came in, so while you're on the mic, we'll address that one. What has the consumer response been to the Smarties plastic-free packaging?
Oh, fantastic! You know, I mean, and going back to what everybody on the call, on the webinar here has been talking about, because it's simple, because it's accessible, and it's very much, you can see a brand doing something. Fantastic. Not just consumers, but retailers. And there are a few retailers out there, and not just because Karl used to work for Dufry, but Dufry were first out of the blocks in terms of creating dedicated space, gondolas, where they were sharing very clearly, sustainably produced products and making this visible and accessible for consumers. Now, Dufry not the only one that have been doing this, but I think they were probably best in class at this point in what they were doing to make this visible and getting it in front of consumers and putting a range of brands who are doing the ethical and the sustainable thing together, so people can I want this and I'll take this, and buying into it. So I think again, it's not just the communication to the consumers, but working in partnership with other players with partners within the industry, our retailers, to make these things come to life.
Yeah, and you mentioned the staff, and it's comes back to some other mindset data. Karl rightly cited the insights Peter quoted earlier this week about the desire and willingness of consumers to spend more when it comes to purchasing more sustainable products across all categories, all regions. But other insights that have come out of recent mindset research shows that also, you mentioned that also, Karl, exclusivities, travel retail exclusivities, very popular in 2021 in particular, and as we come out of COVID-ish, but also the willingness to interact with staff and the impact of staff interaction has been going through the roof. So it's a real opportunity bringing the sustainability message to educate consumers on, hey, this is not plastic, this is paper, and so on and so forth. And are we seeing, Stuart, obviously you work with brand ambassadors, and I'll throw that across to Morten, who had his hand up as well. Are we seeing greater education about not just the product, but also the sustainable messages around the product and packaging?
You have to, because when you get into the product part, exactly as Morten was describing earlier on, you have to find a way to explain to people why they want to pay this premium. And packaging gives you a certain surface, but only so much. So I think this is also, you have to use all the tools in your armory. And I think I'm hoping as we come out of the crisis, the ETRC initiative that Julie Lasange and the team were driving on digital communication at point of sale, that's going to be really critical that we reignite. We as Nestlé, we invested in sustaining that for the ETRC group through the back end of last year, because we don't want to let that go. Because again, it's a simple way of making information extremely accessible in relation to beyond just what you can read on the surface area of a packaging, but allow you to get quickly into depth about the real credentials of how the product may be sourced and everything that goes deeper into what people like Morten or James are doing.
Hello?
Michael, can I say something on that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I totally lost the last few seconds of your replies to it. The reason being is whenever it rains here in Sydney, internet just cuts down. So you all froze. But before you do, Ariane, I just want to throw, because Morten had his hand up. So I knew that was going to happen because he could hear the rain outside. Morten, you had your hand up. I just want to ask you to react to what has just been said, but also to come back to those questions about communication to consumers, whether it's packaging, social media, reaching the different age segments, and the importance of staff.
I think, coming back to that question, I think perhaps communication is the biggest challenge that we face in these coming years. I think the industry has a tendency to be borderline greenwashing when it comes to making claims. And I think we have to be, all of us in the industry have to be really careful not to over exaggerate the efforts that we're doing to an extent where it just becomes unbelievable in a sense, because I think it has a potential to backlash very hard on everyone in the industry. And I see it a lot, especially from new players coming into the category, because in a way they are perhaps a little bit desperate and willing to take more chances. But I would say it's also risky for everyone involved and should be avoided, basically. I also want to just touch on the point. I think James and Stuart both said some good things about how to reach the different consumer segments. So I'm not going to go more into that. But I think, in the question also lies an assumption that it's mostly the younger generations which are, interested in sustainability. And I just want to challenge that assumption a little bit, because I think, absolutely right. The younger generation and the millennials are extremely concerned about the condition of our planet, and they should be. But I also see the same trends with the slightly older generation, and to be just to exemplify that, one learning that we have when launching Trugum, we were expecting our core audience to be people around the age of 25, but we have actually found that our core consumer is 45 years old, and we are only branding ourselves on sustainability. So that just shows that this consideration for sustainability is not just within the younger generation. I just thought that was an important point to point out.
And it was said before the session, we said we mustn't forget to mention this during the session about all your consumer insights as well about the gender difference.
Yeah, well. Absolutely. I mean, I cannot speak for everyone, but I mean, just looking at our consumer data, we can see that approximately 90% of our consumers are female. So that, I think, speaks in volumes of how the different genders perhaps perceive this topic.
Ariane, you wanted to say something there?
Yeah, what I think is also important, what makes this a very unusual suspect, is that people who buy travel retail literally go all over the world. If we buy at our local grocery, bring it at home, then we know the regulations around how to manage our waste. But these customers go everywhere. Meaning, for example, what James said about NatureFlex. Here in the Netherlands, NatureFlex is in practice not composted. I've been to many of these installations, but they just want to get it through in 2 weeks' time, meaning that this expensive NatureFlex just ends up in our burning oven or landfill or even our oceans. So the end of life from travel retail is very much more complicated than any other product what you buy locally, because it literally travels the world, and in every country you have different rules and regulations. My question is to Dufry or to Stewart or Karl. Do you take that in consideration, this very differentiated end of life scenarios in each country?
Stuart, I think you unmiked yourself there, so I feel like you want to say something.
Well, no, it was just before if Karl was going to shoot first, because he's been more in the retail end, and then I was just ready. I was just making myself ready.
Making yourself available. Okay, Karl, would you like to take that?
I've left Dufry in 2019, and I can't answer for Dufry as such. As I said before, we in 2016 started to charge for plastic bags when it wasn't compulsory and as such. But I've asked that question a number of times. But it's an easy answer is, well, you can always take your stuff back. But it's Ariane, I don't think there is one answer you can give in this context. Once you travel, you are conscious and need to know what you're doing with the things you want to dispose of. And if you're saying that even in Holland the disposables are not treated in the right way, that's sad to hear. And in such a country, and I wouldn't know for Sweden either. Or I actually do, but I don't want to comment on that either.
Yes, it's all about infrastructure, and then on top of that, once there is infrastructure in place, educating consumers on how to how to dispose of the products at the end of their cycle. And actually, then there's another layer of it. Even when you make it easy for consumers, will they actually do it? You know, I think we're all at fault, every one of us, for being a little bit lazy when it comes to these sort of things. You know, we're all very busy and you know, have a lot on our plate at the moment, especially. And sometimes I think we're all slightly guilty of not taking the extra step, which would make a huge difference if we did it every day and made it habitual. Yeah, Stuart, did you have something you could add?
More just in relation to from a Nestlé perspective, and I think I can speak for a lot of the bigger food companies, because we have to look at everything along the chain. So it's everything, and we do. And again, if you just go and Google what we're doing in relation to our net zero commitment, we're looking at everything from working with farmers upstream down to end of life of the packaging that goes on. So it's everything which is sitting within the chain. To the point about different countries, yeah, they do. I worked in India for 3 years. Completely different scenario in terms of how evolved the thing is and how consumer thinking is. Moving fast, but in different countries are starting from different places in this respect. What we have to do as a big player, we take our responsibility seriously, because as one of our former, our chairman, who's Belgian, once said, you know, tall trees catch more wind. So we have to take the responsibility and go and do it, and we do, is then work with legislative bodies country by country to advocate for recycling schemes to be put in place. And then exactly as you said, Charlotte, work on the education of the consumers so that they know that they should recycle, because in certain, you know, the majority of people on this call, we're Western European, and not everybody is on the planet. So I think we, you know, certainly we're kind of more evolved than some countries are, but it's the whole planet which is in play here. And we have to work with governments everywhere to be able to put the right sort of end of use systems in place to make sure that it can be used. And again, I go back to what Graham was talking about this morning, which was fascinating in relation to the ways in which they're looking at picking up on the, how was he described it, the 4 elements that help packaging either degrade or become recycled. And I think, you know, that's one element of it. But in the whole of the sustainability for the food category, and this is a discussion about food, the upstream is one of the heavier parts of where the CO2 footprint is currently coming from. The downstream is a smaller, significant, but smaller part. But we have to tackle all of it. We don't have the choice to cherry pick. We've got to do all of it.
You made some good points there, Stuart, about you know, food waste actually, and I'll bring up this stat again. I know I've mentioned it already today in a previous session, but Tessa Clark from Olio, the CEO, she mentioned that 1 kilogram of food waste has the same CO2 emissions as 25,000 500 ml plastic bottles. I think, you know, again, as Ariane mentioned, packaging does sometimes hit the headlines a lot, and then there are other things that have a bigger impact potentially that are forgotten potentially. But Ariane, I know in another conversation we had prior to this, you talked about ingredients and the importance of ingredients, and again you mentioned it today, and how, you know, is there a way of making the ingredients better for you as well, and then there is that other side of it, which is shelf life of a product. Of course, things that perhaps potentially are better for us do have a shorter shelf life. And of course, that attracts a lot of problems for retailers, particularly during the pandemic, when, of course, there were no customers coming into the stores. And then what happens to those products that cannot be bought? Then they obviously become waste. So again, it's kind of this treading this line between including ingredients that are better for us, but at the same time, having a shelf life which makes sense for retailers. And I know, Karl, we drew upon that conversation. And again, when we all came together is a sort of a preliminary conversation. But Ariane, I know that you are quite forceful in that opinion about, you know, using better ingredients and ingredients that are sorry, better for you.
Yeah, what is I call it the decision tree. So you always have to look where the impact is. So animal protein versus plant protein. The second one is food waste. So if the packaging or ingredients enhances preferably on a natural way, the shelf life, that really makes sense, because first of all, there's more time to buy the product, so it doesn't become food waste. And in your fridge also, if it can enhance your shelf life with 2 or 3 weeks, the chance that at home you eat it for a longer period, that really makes sense, because we know that on place 2 is food waste in the chain. And this food waste is massive more impact than the packaging waste. But still there comes again the communication, a cucumber with a skin of plastic. Consumers just refuse it to understand it, unless they might see and make visible how many cucumbers there are wasted also in your fridge after a couple of days. But there is also a great innovation now going on. I don't know if it's worldwide, but it's here in the Netherlands. It's called A-Peel, and it's a sort of a spray natural compound. And they spray the more expensive perishables like mangoes and avocados with it. And because of that, because a mango and an avocado ripes after it is taken from the tree, they can enhance for a long time the shelf life and therefore the food waste. And those figures are significant here in the Netherlands against food waste on a natural way instead of packaging. It's like a sprayed content. It sounds chemical, but the consumer doesn't see and feel it. So those kind of innovations that also comes from nature, actually, it's like biomimicry based on that principle, can be of great importance in the food chain.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That sounds like a really interesting concept. I'd love to hear more about that, actually. Michael, I think we're sort of trying to, well, we could talk about this all day, but we do have to wrap the session up at some point. So in the next sort of 10, 15 minutes, if you've got any more questions from the audience, it'd be great to hear those now.
Yeah, before I do, there's a couple of questions come in just now. One, I'll come to you in a minute, Stuart, but Ariane, when we first spoke, I know it's not really on food, but the whole sustainability topic. When we first spoke, if you recall, there was an initiative that your colleague was working on it, and that I forget the name of the event, Green Serendipity, I think what it was, with Amsterdam Airport and HMS Host and the others. It just gives an example of how we are on food, after all, how airports in the industry, airports, food companies, and so on, can work together on initiatives, even though you did say it didn't go ahead because of issues with the farmers. Do you just want to talk about that, just to sort of give some food inspiration?
Yeah, the airport on its own is a closed circuit, instead of passengers that fly out, buy duty free and fly out. But the restaurant outlets within an airport are in a closed circuit if you consume it there. And what my friend, how I came in this call, did a project was that for engines of airplanes, birds and swans are the biggest threat for accidents. And they don't like to land in miscanthus, that is elephant grass. It's very high, thick, nasty grass. So what we do here on Schiphol Airport is we plant this special grass around the area of Schiphol, but we also need to mow the grass sometimes. And then this comes from the land, and which is a very great fiber, a very long, thick and tough fiber. From this fiber, we can make packaging. Not yet food approved, that's an important part, but we can make packaging out of it. And then for me, the future, I'm pro true pricing, paying the real price, is also circular economy high on the agenda as a part of the solution. Because if we learn to think and act in loops, then we keep the value alive. And that is this example from this grass. So this grass keeps accidents out of the door. We mow the grass, we make new products from renewable resources into packaging. And if we can then make a tray and give you the food product or another non-food contact product on the airport, and then preferably we can recycle that or as biomassa and get energy out of that, then we are thinking and working in closed loops. That always demands intrinsic motivation, a big group of people from different disciplines, and a very sharp goal. And it's a really multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary, but those kind of initiatives are around Schiphol, actually in business at the moment, where we look into these loops.
So yeah, we could close the loop. You have HMSOs using or planning to use that for cutlery, and we could have Nestlé's and Love Cocos and True Gums making their packaging out of this fiber at the end of the day. I guess that was the end game.
Yeah, actually, Nutella is also doing that already from the, and also Veuve Clicquot, from the leftovers. Corona is also doing it from the leftovers from the industry, like the grains or the grape leaves or the Nutella nuts. We can make renewable materials and labels from that. And so instead of it becomes waste, it becomes an ingredient for packaging or other initiatives.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll have to sort of pick your brains and some more inspiration for closed loop circular models like that for future events. So we'll come back to you on that. Thanks, Aaron. Stuart, a question came up. You mentioned earlier on about the GWPs. And a question here refers to Marcus Hudson from Mars, what he mentioned on Monday, saying they've ditched children's toys as GWPs and GTR. Because they've committed to not marketing to children. The question is, it's a bit challenging for brands like Smarties, and the whole DNA is obviously fun and colourful and so on. What's the Nestlé stance on this? Is the question.
Well, it wasn't me who mentioned GWPs in the discussion. I think it was Karl maybe, but in the spirit of the, you've been going through a lot of meetings this week. It's late for you in Sydney, I know. Look, at the same time as Mars were stepping away, we used to have, for those who have worked in the industry, will remember that we used to have Smarties with Disney, and we walked away from the Disney contract more or less around the same time as Mars ditched their toys for exactly the same reason: marketing to children. So, Smarties is a brand where we now talk about, is it okay for parents to give a bit of chocolate to the children? Yes, it is. Childhood without chocolate would be a rather sad place. Proportionality in that becomes critical. So one, Smarties now comes purely in paper packaging. Huge stride forward within that particular one. What we're doing within our communication within the channel is about learn through play, and bringing the colours of Smarties to life in a way which helps stimulate the learning of children. So fundamentally, all our packaging is coming paper-based, carton and paper, and the brand essence continues to live strong, but in a way which is relevant for the consumers today. So I think there's absolutely ways, and exactly the same with Mars had to tackle it we have. Was it painful to walk away? Yeah. Was it the right thing to do? Absolutely. So I think that's, these are steps, practical steps that we're taking, and are markers for consumers. Now, I think the only other thing I would want to say within context of the broader piece, coming back to this thought around, the future of food, and some of the things that have been talked about even in the last couple of minutes, the thought that we're bringing to the party is this thought about regeneration. And it's not just about sustainability, it's about regenerating the planet. And that involves the upstream part, which is about what's happening with the agricultural end of what's going on, and making sure the planet is being renewed from all the aspects of all the elements that are going into the products that we're giving consumers. And with a lot of the creativity that you as TRB have been bringing to everyone's attention this week through this series of webinars, there's a fantastic amount of human ingenuity being brought into play. And I think that's what makes it really exciting. So whilst on the one hand, it's a daunting challenge we have, I think applying our brains in the right way within the right regulatory frameworks, we can get there, and we can get there fast. We just all got to put our shoulder to the wheel to make it happen.
And a question came in for Karl, but I'd like to put it to you as well, Stuart, because obviously it's your category. From your experience as a retailer, Karl, but oops, sorry, but to you also, Stuart, as a food brand, where do you see healthy snacking and food developing more? Now, the more I produce and where it is, I'd imagine they're talking about world regions. Where's healthy snacking and food developing more, in your opinion? Obviously, let's keep it to travel retail.
Karl, do you want to shoot first?
Well, from our experience when talking to the retailers in travel retail, it's obviously the European in the European region. Having said that, I'm working mostly with, or we are working mostly with Nordic brands as such. But it was interesting as well. I quote again, I think it was Peter. And from Mindset, the Americas had a slightly different view on CSR as a whole. It was more about diversity, and I believe yesterday that was also part of the topics, diversity on people, etc. But on food, I would say it starts in Europe, and it will flow over. But Stuart, you probably are more apt to answer and have more insights on that.
I think healthy snacking, is it growing? Yes. Challenge in this segment is it's not particularly gift worthy. So the absolute retail price point of these products can be relatively expensive for, when they put the industry margins and such like on. Potential constraint within there. Going beyond healthy snacking, we've got a number of retailers who are talking to us about the whole health and wellness, which again was a section you had yesterday. And the whole vitamins, minerals, supplements space, and particularly coming out the back of the pandemic and people being aware of their immune system and looking after themselves when they're traveling, the effects of jet lag. I think one significantly unexploited area of the whole food spectrum becomes the whole vitamins, minerals, health sort of supplements space. Interestingly, because we've been doing work on the whole wider food spectrum, it's significant in East Asia, and it has traditionally always been so. And the East Asians have always been more switched into this space. And I think that's something which is actually coming east to west, and people are becoming more tuned into this. So I think that's a space where retailers are talking to us, and it's a space where the margin demands of retailers can be met, and the relative price points that retailers are looking for can be met in a way which is delivering something to a consumer that they want. So I think it's another whole angle on the future of food, going beyond just the pure sweet treat area, which has been the historic sense where it's been. But there are many categories, and we did research at the very back end of last year, which really blew our socks off when we got it. We worked with Mindset, who've been a key partner for us over the last few years, and the breadth of opportunities within food becomes really key. But to come back to a point that I made right at the very start, and to close from my side, I think this is also where bringing the sense of place that airports want to deliver in their experience when they've got consumers traveling through, linked into the sustainability, having something which is from nearby, can play a key part also alongside of a slightly broader portfolio beyond the traditional weighting towards confectionery alone.
Absolutely, and Stuart mentioned drawing to his conclusions to an end, and I think we're going to have to do the same with this session. But before we all go, I'd like to, as I alluded to earlier, I'd like to come to each of our panelists in turn and ask them what next steps or even concrete actions they may be able to take following this session, and indeed the end of Travel Retail Sustainability Week. You may want to wait until the end of your sessions tomorrow before you can actually take those next steps. But these can be anything from escalating conversations you're having at your level and escalating them up the chain, or perhaps maybe engaging more with staff on the shop floor, or perhaps thinking, finally taking the step to actually implement something that has been in inception for a long time. So if I could go and start with Ariane actually, and see if you might be able to take something forward following this session.
What I would like to take forward is that luxury and sustainability can go hand in hand, because I often get that question, but we are in the luxury business. Well, we are really able to design groundbreaking designs, and even are sustainable, always with end of life impact in consideration. It's not true that it should look like old-fashioned or whatsoever. It can absolutely look stunning and still be sustainable.
Sorry, thank you, Ariane. I think, yes, that's another topic in itself, luxury industry versus environmentally friendly. I'll move on to Karl.
I believe that when I joined Blueprint, I had this in mind to drive sustainability amongst others within as a consultant in travel retail. And you only reinforced my images, all the statistics that we've seen from Mindset and all our discussions. And it's absolutely fantastic to learn so many things and listen to all the panelists. So if anything, this just reinforced our mission to continue, well, preaching the gospel. Well, probably not. It's already mainstream, I would say. Mm-hmm. So looking forward to continued great discussions in driving sustainability within travel retail, which is an excellent platform, by the way.
Thank you very much. Well, perhaps another thing you could do is make sure to keep in contact with us and also everyone on the panel to keep us abreast of what you guys are doing in terms of sustainability, and we'd be happy to cover anything, all those developments are online. Morten, I'll come to you next.
There it is. Just had to unmute there. Thank you, Charlotte. I think there's been a lot of interesting points, not only from this debate, but from all the debates taking place throughout this week. I think from today, one of the things that was quite interesting for me and a little bit eye-opening was kind of the exceptional challenges in terms of end of life that the travel retail industry faces. I think that is a very good point made by Ariane, and something I hadn't thought about. These unique challenges that we don't see in the domestic retail. So I think that's very interesting, and also looking into perhaps some examples of how true price is being used in reality, Ariane. I don't know if you can share that, but if there are any brands or retailers that are using this effectively, I think it would be very nice to look further into, because I think the concept is extremely interesting, and I completely share your thoughts on that should be the actual price, because that's what we should do. Also think that this the fact that this conversation is even taking place, and that we've been able to collect so many stakeholders from the industry throughout today, and that you, Charlotte, and Michael are taking the initiative to host this is extremely, it makes me extremely happy for the industry. And just coming into it, I'm very much looking forward to hopefully the changes that we're going to see within the food and beverage category going forward. So thanks for pushing that message.
Thank you, Morten, and thank you for the compliments as well from everybody. I must say that myself and Michael are just part of the machine, and TR Business has a fantastic wealth of individuals that are working really, really hard on this platform, and our partners Blue Dog and Cvent as well. So I'd just like to give them a shout out. And over to you, please, James.
Yeah, just 100% echo what Morten's just said. I think it's really great that we're having this conversation. It's really important. So yeah, great to be part of it. Just in terms of what I've learned from it, I think sort of just getting that messaging across to consumers what we do. I think with our Love Cocoa brand, we plant a bar for every tree, and that's very clear. And I think it's very sort of striking and very what consumers like, and we can get that message across to travel retailers as well. People who are traveling to plant a tree and pick up a nice gift is great. And just on our hip chocolate, which is the oat milk chocolate one, sort of really getting that messaging across, be it maybe more upstream than the packaging, which we're probably a little bit more focused on at the moment, sort of getting more information around our CO2. It's really interesting to hear some of the comments and the feedback in this conversation around that actually packaging doesn't have a bigger effect. I think it has that visibility, and no one wants to see their product on a beach somewhere in a beautiful place, and I think that's what the young generation see. But there's that education piece and that messaging piece that we need to dig into a bit more. So yeah, I've learned that from it.
Great, thank you, James. Really appreciate you showing that contribution there. And finally, Stuart.
Just unmute. Look, I think from our side, certainly connecting up with Graham, as I mentioned from this morning's session, I thought that was fascinating, because I've got a good South African colleague of mine who runs our packaging institute, and I want Gavin Steiner. I want to connect Graham with Gavin. The other thing we'll be doing will be shamelessly merchandising the fact that we got our 5-star award win yesterday. But we can do that thanks to you guys, because you organised this. So again, as Morten said, and again, thanks to you guys, you're organising this. I know I said it to Nigel when you got the whole thing set up, and I said it to Michael on a couple of occasions, that you're creating this forum this week that's giving people the ability to engage and talk about this and get the subject here, and that you're doing it for free. And making it is fantastic. So shout out also to the sponsors who are helping you bring that to life. Thank you to everyone. Been a great session, and look out for the news that we're sharing tomorrow, because again, it's all stepping down that journey. Nicola Wells will share that one with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I look forward to hearing that news tomorrow. So please, everybody, tune in for tomorrow's sessions, which Michael will talk more about in a second. But yes, thank you to every one of you. Your contributions have been fantastic, and I'm sure everybody viewing will really appreciate them. And as I said, we've said many times, all of our sessions will be available on our YouTube channel. Just literally go onto YouTube, type in TR Business, and you'll see everything that we've talked about so far. Apart from this session, this will take a few hours to appear on the channel, and we'll also promote that via our own website, trbusiness.com, as well. So yes, all that's left for me to say is a big thank you to all of you, and yes, please do, all of you panelists, please all tune in tomorrow as well. I think you'd learn even more. So thank you, Michael, for some final remarks.
Thanks, Charlotte, and thanks to all of you. Don't go yet, Ariana, we haven't finished. It's been really encouraging to hear all the exchanges, and to pick up on what you were saying, Stuart, and as others have said, we want to collaborate, we want to get together and put our heads together with people having heard these conversations. This is what it's all about. We want this to be a springboard. Tracy Ross was saying it herself, and in parallel thoughts, we said, we've got to use this and tell people at the end of each session, we want you to tell us how you would like to move forward, as we've just been asking you, and collaborate. And Tracy said the same thing. They did that last year with 2 or 3 companies having talked together on a session, and in the weeks and months that followed, they came up with a collaborative initiative, and they talked about it earlier this week in the design session. It's great, and we want to see more of that. So fantastic that Stuart and Graham, you'll be getting together, and Ariane, your brains will be picked by many, I think, as well, following this session. Also echoing what Charlotte just said, yes, there is a big team behind from different partners. Blue Dog, Ollie's there streaming this session for us to make sure it all goes smoothly. We've got Stephen in the background, but also the team at TR Business, from production to sales and management, of course, and editorial, bringing this all together, without whom obviously it's also not possible, because they're the sales team in particular, getting all you sponsors to help us support this event and run it. So thanks to everybody concerned. Finally, before we go, yes, as Charlotte said, tomorrow we've got the last 3 sessions, the 2-part closing keynote, where, as Stuart has alluded to, we'll have some breaking news from Nestlé, but we'll also have some breaking news from Nuno at Arianta, but in his capacity as board member at Aptra, who are going to be announcing something interesting and exciting tomorrow. So do tune in for all 3 sessions tomorrow. And we will be taking this conversation further during the Travel Retail Consumer Forum, as I mentioned earlier, in Cyprus in September. We'll be talking about diversity and inclusion and health and well-being, some of the topics we've talked about today in our webinars in June, on June the 1st and June the 15th. More on trbusiness.com coming soon on that. We'll be seeing some of you, hopefully a lot of you, in Singapore at the TFWA event in early May, where we're curating the Sustainable Future session alongside Mindset, with some consumer insights on Asia-Pacific behavior around sustainability, and talking about the future of the business, the sustainable future of the business in general, there at that session on Wednesday, the 11th, I believe, of May. And finally, as every year for the last 5 years, the Travel Retail Awards is in full swing at the moment. Entries are flowing in for the 2022 edition. So you can submit your entries for the best, by category, for the best confectionery, the best spirits products, and so on, but also the best sustainable supplier award, and there's also the best sustainable cruise, airport, or airline retail award. So all companies can take part. The submissions close at the end of May, and then all the winners will be announced during the Travel Retail Awards ceremony, which will be on Tuesday, the 4th of October in Cannes during the TFWA event there. So we look forward to seeing many of you there at a venue which will be announced very, very soon. So that's it from us for today. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks to Mars, Diageo, Nestlé, Stewart, and Ritter Sport for supporting this particular session also. Take care and farewell, God bless, wherever you are.